How old are you right now?
25.
I'm 20, yeah.
It's 73.
73 old years. We were both born in 1945, within a couple months of each other. I was born in February,
In April.
right? I was born in Lemon Grove, California, of all places. Did you were born?
Here in Seattle.
Yeah. Not straight of my family. They're all from Polish ancestry, and the United States roots are in Ohio. 1945 was not long after the war ended, World War II. My dad and mom, and, I guess it was just my two brothers then, left Ohio and made their way across country. My dad went to work, I think, for Ryan Aircraft down there. But then they came up here because my dad got a job, I believe, as an insurance agent. So that's how I got up here. How about you?
Oh, I'm a mixed bag. My dad was English and Scotch, and I think there were a couple other things in there, but I'm not positive. And my mom was Czechoslovakian and a little Polish that she didn't even know until later in life when she started doing the genealogy. She found that there were some Polish records. I believe both my mom's parents were born in the United States, but my great-grandparents were born in Czechoslovakia. And it was very difficult to get a lot of the genealogy because of the wars and the records.
Yeah.
A lot of the records were destroyed.
Particularly that area.
Yeah, so
Yeah, my folks were both born in the United States, both in Ohio, the Lorraine area. But their parents, my grandparents, came over from Poland. My mom's mom was actually a translator, I think, at the UN. And so I was here at the age of 2, and we lived in kind of the Burien area then. So at 2, you were where?
we lived in McMicken Heights when I was 2. It's South Seattle too. Yeah, well, my mom was from New Jersey. She and her sister, my Aunt Betty, traveled across the country. Aunt Betty's fiance was in Seattle. And so they sang and yodeled on the radio in Texas. They just kind of stopped and made their way slowly across the country. And then my mom stayed here and got a job at Boeing, and she met my dad there. And then she went back to New Jersey. They didn't know each other for very long. And so she went back to New Jersey, and then he wrote her a letter and said, "Oh, hell, will you marry me?" And so she flew back, and they got married. And yeah, my dad, I don't remember whether he still worked for Boeing, but I know there was a tremendous housing shortage at that particular time. And so they lived with my grandmother in this little itty bitty house on Beacon Hill, with 1 bedroom. Well, they kind of had an upstairs little loft thing, and 1 bathroom, and this tiny little kitchen and living room. I mean, you could hardly 2 people pass each other in the living room. So, but they lived there for a while until they could finally find a house. And so, after we moved to McMicken Heights, I guess my mom's allergies, she got some terrible, terrible allergies, and so they wanted to move closer to the water, so that the air was a little cleaner, and that's why they moved out to Burien and they built that house. So, and I was 6 when we moved into there. I started first grade at Lake Burien. I can remember visiting with my grandmother. I was probably 6 years old, and she lived on a farm in Pennsylvania. And they didn't have indoor plumbing. We had to go use an outhouse, and for some reason or other, I guess because it was so different from anything that I'd ever seen before, it just really stayed with me all these years. So.
Yeah, we lived in it was a small house. It was like less than 1,000 square feet. The yard was big. And I remember growing up having, as was typical of the Depression, because we had the Depression and we had wars, and parents went all through that. Our parents were deeply affected, particularly by the Depression. They had gardens and raised chickens, and I remember going out to collect the eggs, and then we had to kind of harvest the chickens, you know. I remember that at a very early age. So I was up here at the age of 2, but as we progressed on, and I was probably, my memories start shaping up maybe around 5 or 6. The roads were all dirt roads, and as was typical of most things then. And, you know, a stoplight was a real unusual thing. We had a lot of freedom too.
You did. You and your brothers did, yes.
Yeah, well, it's one of the differences between being raised a boy maybe, or just the way we were raised is, you know, we would get up in the morning and we'd just take off. We'd go hang around my buddy's place. We had a field out there that we kind of leveled out as best we could. We played baseball, and that was a lot of fun. Messing around like you do when you're kids, and most of the food that we had was, a lot of it came from our own yard. We never really bought chicken or eggs or anything like that because we had them. For special occasions, we'd have chicken dinner. Or just once a month we'd have chicken because you got to harvest the chickens anyway.
But talking about the chickens, I remember our neighbors when we were still in McMicken Heights had chickens, and their daughter, her name was Cookie, and she was, I think, a year older than I was, and so they were going to butcher these chickens, and just being shocked that they chopped this chicken's head off and it could run around without its head, and it was just gross.
Well, when I was 7, our church was in was St. Francis, which was way off in Cedar. And my parents, we were raised Catholic, and they were, you know, very devout. And so we went to catechism up there and all that, and then they opened a school up there. And so it was a real problem getting me to school, and my brother Larry, my 2 older brothers are 10 years older than I am. And so about 3rd grade, I started at St. Francis, and that put, you were living here, and you moved here, and I moved here. Uh-oh. So that's how we got living closer together, was my parents moved out. We moved to Seahurst, which was not very far away from where they were.
I never got in trouble in school.
Yeah,
ever.
right. I heard
never
about your
did.
stories.
I never got in trouble.
What about that story you keep telling, how you were so embarrassed because they said they pulled somebody's hair?
Oh, I guess I did get in trouble. I take that back. On the bus, this girl kept hitting me every time. This is 1st grade. And every morning on the bus or in the evening, she'd be picking on me, and I finally just took a hold of her braid and yanked it. And she told the teacher. And the teacher stood up in front of the room, and the whole class and said, "It's just really too bad we have a girl like this in our classroom." I was just mortified. Here this girl had been pounding on me for weeks, and I finally stuck up for myself. And the teacher embarrassed me so bad.
I was Mr. Straight Arrow. Ask her.
Yes, he never.
Too straight of an arrow.
Older than his years. He never was a teenager, really. At least
So I was
not that
1st grade.
I know about.
So they would have a first bell and a second bell. The first bell would go off, and then they had to wait a few minutes, and then the second bell, and you run and stand in line. So I ran and stand in line. I was fast, so I'd get up there and I'd be right in front of the line. Well, this one kid got tired of being second in line, so he shoved me out of the way, and got me to get in line. He shoved me out. Well, the teacher it's like football. You know, the referee only sees the second foul, and the same thing as her. You know, I was called out in front of the class and shamed, and I was not so bad. All of my experiences, I sort of bubbled to the top. So I wasn't just a patrol boy. I was a captain of the patrol boy. I wasn't just an altar boy. I was a head altar boy of all that. I wasn't just the baseball player. I was a captain of the team, and so on. I wasn't just in the play. I starred in the play Tom Sawyer. I never thought anything about it. Just, well, they shove you in these roles. I didn't ask for them. They shove you in all these roles, you know. But those seem to naturally gravitate to me throughout my early life like that. But I was always really a quiet kid. Most of the people were blue-collar workers, laborers of one sort or another. My dad was a church salesman, so he had a suit and a tie he wore every day. And I wanted to have a job where I could have a white shirt, a suit, and a tie. I didn't know what that was, and because that was really special to me. The phones we had were what?
The rotary dial phones attached to the wall or sitting on the counter and that type of thing, yeah.
And they were party lines.
Oh, and the party lines, yes. We had to pick up the phone and listen to make sure nobody else in the neighborhood was talking on the phone. So, yeah.
And you would use the operator a fair amount to
Yes.
get hooked up to with Leroy's number or
Yeah.
phone numbers. We didn't have area codes or anything. We were the only area.
My mom's family was all back east in New Jersey. My dad had one brother, and I had my grandmother and one cousin, and they were very small. You know, we didn't get a lot of gifts. We always had turkey for dinner. I mean, Mom always, tried to do and make it as special as she could, but they were very, very frugal. And they...
All products of depression.
We didn't get a lot of toys and things. I mean, we would get maybe one or two presents and that was it. And so it's not like it is now, for sure. But yeah, most of our holidays were pretty quiet just because we didn't have a lot of family in the area, so.
What about your clothes?
Oh, my mom made everything. She made all my clothes. And
Same
I
with
was
me.
so excited in the 5th
Store-bought
grade. They
clothes
bought
were-
me a dress for Christmas. They
Store-bought
actually
clothes
bought
was
a
really
dress.
special.
But looking back on it now, my mom was a great seamstress. She did a beautiful job with her sewing. It really was a special thing, but when that's all you ever had, I guess it doesn't seem so special anymore. But
The word was turned now. Handmade stuff is the
Yes.
good stuff.
yeah.
And the store-bought stuff is it China or India? But we would go down to store called Wigwam.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Wigwam was kind of like I don't know, a surplus store or something like
Yeah.
that, or the Sears bargain basement.
Yeah. We always called it the junk basement.
Yeah, that too. And so we get things like jeans. Well, we didn't get this fancy Levi thing. Go and get pants. Then when I went to grade school, of course, we had uniforms, so we had to go in and we wore the same uniform. And we would celebrate like Thanksgiving I do believe it was a turkey dinner. It wasn't one of the big chickens, although it could have been. And then Christmases were always special. We just couldn't wait for Christmas. And I got a Daisy Red Ryder shoot your eye out gun, BB gun. They were always special. But the gifts weren't anything fancy at all. They were cars or fire engines. And so we would go out in the yard and in dirt and make these elaborate towns with roads. And then they went up on a hill and we'd play for hours with those things.
We went camping in a smelly old campus tent. No, we did. we did a lot of camping in the mountains and hiking and up into Canada. And then every other year we'd take the train back to New Jersey and spend a month with my grandparents in New Jersey. And then of course my dad couldn't get enough time off work, so he stayed home. And just my mom and my brother and I would go. So, and that was, Betty had 4 children, so we had cousins that were close to the same age that, so we had somebody to play with and that sort of thing. So, and I think I was probably 15 the last time we did that. So, and then of course, once we were in high school and everything, my mom just went by herself and we stayed home, so. But that was pretty much it. I just remember freezing in a tent in a sleeping bag up in the mountains.
So never will be again.
No. Motorhome was more my style, I guess.
Well, our vacations, I don't recall that we ever went. I know we went to Yellowstone once, and I got the mumps or something like that. And I do remember with my brother, we were playing tag. But then when we went, we'd have to draw an arrow to where we were and draw another arrow here. And so the one that was ready or not, here I come, would follow those arrows and go around to eventually find where you were hiding. I know, my little brother's turd. And so he went out and ruined the arrow thing. And he'd go, and all of a sudden, the arrows stopped. Like going around the corner, and here was this big bear in a garbage thing there. So he beat it out of there. Meanwhile, it says, feet don't fail me now. One of the things that we did do every year, on the 4th of July, we would go down to the ocean and we'd rent a cabin. Cabins are interesting. They got a wood-burning stove in the middle of it that you could cook on if you wanted. And they had some bunk beds. And then you'd bring your own sleeping bags. Sleeping bags then were
Awful.
awful. Wool things. But then we'd go outside and we'd go down and dig clams. And then we'd come up and we would make this big, huge pot of clam chowder over a fire. There wasn't any gas stove or any of that kind of stuff. And so that was a special thing. We did that every year. That was probably our closest we had to a traditional vacation. The ocean was not far away. It was about 150 miles west of here, something like that. And then my dad had a company picnic called the Prudential Picnic right here at Cottage Lake, Euclid. They would have this hay bale spit out put money out and change, all that kind of stuff. And then we go out fishing in a rowboat. That's where I learned how to row a boat. When we finally got TV, we had a black and white TV that had a screen about this size, and a cabinet about the size of this chair. And there were not that many programs on. And then once we watched that, and we could listen to the radio. I used to have this little crystal radio. I'd sneak it in my bed at night. I'd listen to that thing and listen to the music stations and the radio, the Shadow Knows, and all that kind of stuff. Classic radio stuff. Man, she was pretty. She still is pretty. And I was smitten, I guess, and never got over it.
Yeah. So we were in the eighth grade, I think, when we finally did meet each other.
Our paths crossed at probably roughly age 13.
It's 14.
14, yeah.
We never did go to the same school.
Oh,
He was in private all of his school years, and I was in public. Talk about a small world. On our trip back from New Jersey, I met this girl, same age as I am, and come to find out, after 3 days on this train, she went to St. Francis and lived like 4 blocks from me. But I didn't know her because I went to public school and she went to private school. And so we got to be really good friends and stayed friends even out of high school for quite a little while. So
But, so 13, and then we're 73?
it's been a few years, yes.
Wow, a long time ago. We were just best friends then.
For a long time.
Friends through high school and all that. Did really well in grade school. Grades and all that kind of stuff. And so they were, and I was going to go to the seminary to be a priest. And so the teachers and the priest there encouraged me to go to Federal Preparatory High School. And so I ended up going to prep, and then I would, my folks, I don't know how they helped pay for that. I might have had some scholarship help, I'm not sure. High school was all the way in Seattle. There were no freeways then, and it was the commute from hell. My dad worked up by Prudential, so we could get a ride, which was in Seattle. I could get a ride in with him, but I had to find my own way home. And I would typically get home at 7, 8 o'clock at night, get the bus connection to, and the bus just didn't come all the way out where we were, so I had to walk. But you had a junior high school.
I went to junior high school.
So you went from grade school to a junior high school to high school.
Yeah. And then as a sophomore is when I started high school. So I went to Highlight. So it's just a difficult normal high school. Nothing special about it at all.
But it's still there.
And it's still there. And
Seattle was an all-boys school, but it no longer is. It's a co-ed one.
Everything is co-ed now.
I had my first car when I was 13. My older brother gave it. It's a Crosley. Look at that. It's a crazy car. Learning to drive was the biggest thing in the world. That's why I can't understand these millennials that says, well, I'm not, I guess I might drive one day or whatever. I couldn't wait, because I was a car freak then. I'd sneak on the streets and drive up and down the block and then run back to the driveway because there's got to be a cop behind every tree, And I would get my cars going and I'd hop it up and see it, kind of make it go a little faster. And I'd sit there and see how long a patch of rubber I could lay with that thing. And that was at 13, 14. And then when I reached 16, my dad would take us out and let me drive the big car and learn the rules of the road and read that little manual, the driver's manual. And so we went down to take the test, and the side of this little building was all caved in. And so some lady took the test earlier that day, and not only did she put it in drive instead of reverse, what she thought was the brake was the gas pedal, right through the wall.
My dad taught me. I was 17. I didn't get my license at 16. I got it at 17. So, and then I had a 56 Chevy that they got for me. I paid for half of it, and they paid for half of it. So,
but things would break, and we couldn't go buy a replacement part or this and that all the time. So we learned how to fix things. And I finally got a job as a mechanic, but it was in a small shop. I learned different kind of things, learned a lot. So that's where I learned how to weld and how to, operate a lathe and skills like that.
Lou's down in Burien.
It's a hamburger joint.
Yeah, I don't even think there's Lou's around anymore.
No, the Seattle Prep, they had Dick's and the Berg. Actually, Burgermaster. And so the Burgermaster is known throughout the whole region.
Yeah.
It's about the University of Washington. So there's a little more affluent crowd with some of the prep people. Prep was considered the snooty school, although Day was not. So yeah, those were the hamburger joints we all around. And then we would go to Spuds.
Oh, I know.
What can I? Yeah, once in a while we go for rides.
Yeah, we drive the loop around Alki. That's where in the summertime
We love going for drives.
Yeah, we'd hang out down there. I'd go out there with my girlfriends and our baby oil and iodine and spend the day at the beach, frying in the sun. I worked it's like kind of like Baskin and Robbins, but it was an ice cream place. It was called Shamrock Dairy, and it was out by the airport. And I worked there my senior year. Yeah.
I worked in I mentioned a place called Bailey Freebuilt, and they worked on small motors, lawnmowers, electric motors, and all that kind of stuff. And so I had that job. That's where I started to figure out what I really wanted to do for a living. And I worked like 6 days a week on a commission basis. I had a long drive to get there, and but I'd get all dirty and greasy and go home. And I was so tired, and then I get cleaned up as best I could, and then come back the next day and get dirty, greasy again, and then get someone cleaned up and go home. And I said, I don't want to. Where's my dream of having a white collar job,
Our senior party was at a park somewhere, and it was a miserable, drizzly, rainy day. And they had a band, and they had a covered area where we could go and dance and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I had the ceremony. There were a couple hundred kids that graduated when I did, and it was like in the gym. It wasn't, we didn't have it anywhere else. So whereas now, they go rent out these big places, because some of the schools now, like Ryan, I think there's like 6,000 kids in that school. I mean, it's a huge school. So, but we were, a fairly small class. So yeah, it was, I do remember after graduation, I had some Jim Beam whiskey. Never in my life had I had anything like that. We were out at Saltwater Park, and this nice young man was holding my head while I was puking over a log. And I thought, I'll never drink again. That was just awful. I was so embarrassed. And so, but anyway, I spent the night, a bunch of us spent a night at one of the girls' house because I couldn't go home. That was probably the biggest thing that I remember is just puking.
That was your first experience with alcohol?
Yes.
We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
My first experience with my friend based in Homebrew.
Oh,
so, bottled it all up. Says, let's give it a try. Like that. Man, that was powerful stuff. No, that was. Graduation for me, we had graduation from grade school, which was, they made a big deal out of that. But when I graduated from prep, I think he was probably in the auditorium as well, in the cap and gown. It could have been, it was one central location where the whole archdiocese had all the Catholic schools together. I don't recall. And there were no senior parties, and well, I'm sure there were, but I was so far away that I wasn't a part of that.
I went to school to be a hairdresser, and I finished, and I worked in a shop in Kent. Gosh, I don't know, maybe for a year. So yes, I can remember my mom telling me, girls don't need to go to college, you're just going to get married and have kids. So you just need to find something to do that you like, until that happens. And so that times have changed so much since then.
After high school, of course, I went to University of Washington College, and about that time, the Vietnam War was breaking out, I was at a very draftable age, as were all my friends. It was tough at the University of Washington because a lot of people, you get a student deferment if you were attending college. And so it was pretty sought after, but the university was getting overwhelmed by people there. So it was hard to stay in college at that time. Things changed later. The old anti-war things started kicking in, and they became havens for keeping people out of the draft. They could do that. I got I guess you call it a job, as a houseboy. So I moved in with this family, and I do the dishes and clean up the house, and they had these dogs and whatnot, this big area, and they crap all over the basement. I had to clean that up. I had to clean up all the dishes, and I hardly interacted with the family at all. You know, I was really lonely. And then some bad things happened. The big bad thing happened. My dad got sick, but we don't go into details. He died. I mean, my dad and I were really close. And so now I was really alone. I didn't have any awful potential, any friends. One day I finally had it. I opened the window to my room and stuck out and jumped in my car and drove back home. Moved back here with my mom because my dad had passed away. And just never recall feeling so alone. And the university is huge, mammoth place. I think I told you this story, but I'll never forget it. Well, you get that draft notice, your jaw drops. And so, I was an engineering student, top of my game. I was able to be an officer out of me. So I went in there, took their test, and just breezed right through it. Thought, this is going to happen, maybe they'll make the best of it. And I was done right away, and I was of the first, if not the first person. So there was a lot of people, big warehouse full of these people that were being drafted. And so the guy, Zilgate, come with me, and he went and opened a door to another room, another massive amount of people sitting at the table. Says, I want you to help these guys here. And so I went over to help one of the guys. He's looking at this test questions. I think there are a lot of them, there are multiple choice or this and that. And so he looked up at me, and I'd read the question to him, and then he'd say, "Oh, okay." Well, he was illiterate. He couldn't read, and he couldn't write, and the whole room was full of it. Well, here I had been going to private schools my whole life, basically, up to then, and the whole thought that there was somebody my age, 18, something like that, 19, that couldn't read or write, flabbergasted me. Well, then how do I help the guy? I can't tell him the answer. Like they said, well, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? So I kind of steered that. That was a huge eye-opener to the rest of the world for me. I went in and they did the physical part of it, and they did the eye test. And I flunked royally because my eye from like 20 to 50 or 20. I mean, the big letter was hard to read. So I wasn't good enough to get shot.
Legally blind, basically.
Yeah. It was driving me nuts. She kept telling me about all her boyfriends and this and that, and I'd have girlfriends and whatnot. And then I would disappear for a while. I just couldn't take these stories anymore. It was just driving me nuts. And so I said, you know what? I'm just crazy about this woman. I got to do something. So I said, I've never really pursued her. She was always my best friend, good buddy. I never really pursued her like a girlfriend. So I switched gears. and started to pursue her like a girlfriend. Well, she right away had similar feelings, and boom, it clicked, and it was magic. We both lost time. All we could think about was each other. Now at this time, I went to work for Boeing. So I went to work just deburring parts, but then I get discovered out in the shop. And so this big PhD guy says, hey, we shouldn't be out here doing this stuff. And he says, how'd you like to go to work in our research lab? I said, sure. So I did that. I got a great job. Another big ratchet up the ladder. And then we just spent every waking moment together. We'd take the top down. We just, neither one of us wanted to be apart. It was something. That was just really something. And then Bob took Bush to one day. And she said, no way. Oh, no, that was we were both so. And then one of the things we did was, I had a lot of friends who got married because they sort of had to, I said, well, we're going to wait because we weren't that way. We were traditional, those kind of things that are for after you're married. So we waited a year. We had a very long engagement.
We only waited, we were engaged 6 months.
How much?
6 months.
It's too long. Your parents started chipping at you then.
And they weren't.
Well, you're too young. You sure you're ready to go? I was 21 and she was 20. And by today's standard, that's pretty young.
I was really young.
And so finally, I sat down with her parents and had a talk with them. I don't know if you were there. You probably weren't.
I wasn't.
And I said, look, she's all upset. She thinks you don't want us to get married. She said, I don't know. You're not going to find, if she's going to find anyone better than me, show me the criteria. Basically. Yeah, but we're going to do it with your blessing or not. And things change, our relationship changed with the parents. That's when I sort of moved into the adult world when that whole episode happened. So we got married and got married in church, big nuptial mass, big formal thing at high noon.
At that time, that was the latest you could get married in the Catholic Church and have the nuptial mass. You couldn't, because we wanted an evening wedding and we couldn't do it.
Yeah, so boom, we were together and we moved into
It was a trailer. It was a trailer.
Yeah, mobile home, I get.
It was a trailer.
Let's try to get our motorhome is bigger now.
What?
It was 50 feet long, ours was 34 feet long, but that's all we needed.
So I went to work at Boeing in the reproducing document area, and I was there probably a year. My friend Jeannie had gotten married just before we did, and her husband worked as a contract engineer without a degree, and he got jobs all over, and so that's when we moved to Texas because he got.
Yeah, he came over. We go play canasta or something.
Well, we play cards and all that kind of stuff. Pina colada.
And they said, "Hey man, I got this up. You got to do this." I said, "Well, I'm not an engineer. I haven't finished my degree." Don't worry, I'll write your resume. They'll get you in.
Yeah, so they fudged his
I
resume.
well, you had enough classes to know the design work. And I really had some rudimentary drafting courses, and I ended up jumping on a plane, first airplane ride in my life, and I was about 21 years old.
Yes.
Flew all the way across country. It was in February or something like that.
Yeah.
Cold air. Got out of the plane in Dallas and hit with that 90-degree day.
And I stayed home and worked because we didn't know how this was going to work out. So I stayed.
I was convinced I was going to get fired any second. They were going to. So all I did was I worked a ton of overtime, made a ton of money. It's that time.
They got per diem.
So I did really well there.
So you were there like about 3 weeks. and you said, okay, I think I can do this. You need to pack up the car and the dog and come down here. So cleaned out the trailer, rented it out to, I think somebody you worked with.
Egbert.
Yeah. And so they were renting the trailer that we lived in, and we packed everything we had in this ugly little Barracuda car. And so I drove from Seattle down to Dallas, the dog and I did. And my dad...
Packed everything we owned was in that car.
Yeah. My dad sat down with me with the map and showed me, okay, which was the best route to take. And they said, stay in, nice hotels. Don't, stay in little dives somewhere because you're by yourself. And so I called them every night to let them know where I was and that I was okay. They were not happy at this point that I was doing that. So it took me, 3 or 4 days, I think, to drive down.
I remember when she called, we talked, Remember when you arrived there, John?
I know, and I was lost. What was Grand Prairie, and I was lost. And so I knew I was in the right town, but I didn't know how to get to the apartment that he was at. So they came and got me.
We had our little dog, that was our family.
Yeah.
Little poodle.
Little poodle.
Michelle. And oh man, when you rolled in there. Wow. That was really special.
Before Scott was born, before I was even pregnant with Scott, you started flying lessons.
Oh yeah, that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a life changer.
Yeah.
So I have these passions that come and go throughout my life. And they're
obsessive passions.
And they're about everything you could think of. So it might be photography this day, or RVing, or it might be, in this case, was flying. I didn't go to the flight school. I taught myself I read the books and all that. Took
you got the manual that he was supposed to, that the test was based on.
And then I would take my flight lessons, and I got my pilot's license. I was kind of still a really quiet kind of guy, very quiet kind of guy. But when you're learn to be a pilot, or you're a pilot, and you are responsible for someone else's life that's with you, and you got to and you're the one that communicates with the outside world, the tower and approach control and all that kind of stuff. You step up your game quite a bit and it gave me so much confidence. And I finally ended up buying a plane down there.
Yeah, a little track racer.
Yeah. They didn't have permanent tie downs, so they had these like 5-gallon buckets full of concrete. They tie you down to, airplane to pick that and fly that away. Well, some tail dragger guys took the big windstorm came through.
Yep.
He went through there just whipping that tail around because he had his tail tied down, wiping out some classic planes, and then my plane wiped it out. So
Yeah, it was not nice.
Yeah, that was cool. Our life down there in Texas was completely different.
Yeah. Well, too, and the fact that we've never lived anywhere but here, and the climate, everything down there is so different. I can remember going to the grocery store and people moved so slow. I mean, the pace down there was so slow, and I'm get this done now, and it's like, they need to move, they need to get this done. So, it was really an eye-opener about how different parts of the country, how different people are.
Nice people, really.
Oh,
nice
very
people,
nice people, but it just was a
and-
much slower paced life
And
down there.
nobody wore jeans. You'd get dressed up to
Oh,
go out to
get
the
to-
mailbox.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really, I'm sure it's not that way now necessarily, but back then, man.
It was a very
Yes.
proper area. It was cool. It was a great thing.
It was a good experience. It
People
was good
are
for
nice. I
both
think
of us.
the joke used to be that Texans are the most obnoxious loudmouths that you could ever run into elsewhere. But the Texans in Texas really nice.
They're very nice
Really
people,
nice
very
people.
friendly.
We met a lot of friends down there.
Yeah.
We were about a couple years into that. We said, you know, maybe it's time to start a family.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was due September 1st, and Mom flew down on, I saw that, probably on the 30th. I'd been having a backache all day, and so I went to airport, went to Love Field, picked her up, and took her to the apartment.
In Dallas.
In Dallas still, yeah. My back was just gone, you know, and I had all my labor in my back. For some reason or other, I was just not aware that, you know, it was possible to have labor in your back. I just always assumed you just got this gigantic stomach ache, and, you know, that was it. It must have been sometime in the middle of the night that I realized that, okay, this is not just a backache from being pregnant, that I was in labor. So she had gotten there in the afternoon, and then he was born the next morning. And so, but...
God, I was so upset.
Well, they gave me some kind of drug that, I didn't...
And then they were trying to, you know, and they were just manhandling her around, and I thought, you know, these guys are gonna kill Linda trying to have this baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just.
Well, and they kept me in the hospital for 4 days, you know, which even back then was unusual. You know, 2 to 3 days was what they normally kept you. But he was 7 pounds 7 ounces. He was perfectly healthy and all that. So we went home to our apartment. My mom stayed for, I think 3 weeks and helped out, you know, those first 3 weeks. And not knowing anything, I mean, we had information available and all that kind of stuff back then, but it's not like it is now, where everything is so open and, you know, people aren't afraid to talk about stuff, you know, like they used to be. You know, things were private.
But Scott, we moved to this apartment, to a bigger apartment in the complex, and had a big pool. And Scott used to, you know, jump in and swim underwater.
The pool.
Yeah, kid could barely walk, and he was in that pool, swimming underwater, all that kind of stuff. I tried to drown him. Didn't happen.
So he was probably, I want to say, maybe 8 or 9 months old when we bought our house, our very first house in DeSoto. And down there, things are all brick. And it was a brand new house. It was
beautiful house, brick with a shake roof, all hand, cabinets were all handmade.
Yep.
Really nice.
Yeah. So, but then after we moved into the house, he got laid off, which is part of being a contract person. When the contract is over, your work is done, and so then he went to work in San Antonio.
Yeah, I picked up the phone. What you got going? You're always on top of your game then. There was a lot of layoffs over the years, and I survived most of them. But basically, we finally were through building and designing what we needed to design. So that contract ended, and so did we travel the country after that?
No. It was after we sold the house. You went to work in San Antonio and then commuted on the weekends back and forth?
San Antonio is like 275 miles, just like commuting between here and Spokane or something.
No, it wasn't that far. I don't think so.
It was a ways.
It was a ways, but I don't think it was that far. We got a trailer and we thought, okay, we're here. We don't know how long we're going to be here, what's going to happen, so we're going to see as much of this area as we can.
It was a camping trailer, RV trailer,
Yeah.
not a trailer like that.
Not like
we
what
lived
we're
in
living
a
in.
pretty
No.
nice apartment.
So we did. We went all over Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and did. I mean, we did a ton of stuff down there.
So I'd be working all these hours. So what we do is we wait, and then when I got off work, we'd leave that night and drive, camp beside the road, and drive some more, and then we go down to Galveston, for example, at a time on the beach, or we go to some of the state parks, or a lot of the things were free then, the Corps of Engineer was.
Yeah.
We had a canoe. That was another boat
Yeah.
we had. We go out and after work or run, and we go canoeing in these different places. And so we had be very careful with the kids. If you falling in, and I don't want you getting into the boat. So I had Scott there. You know, I don't know if he had Mark. No, we didn't. Just only Scott. And so don't you move until we're ready for you. We'll put you in there because we had to load up our little ice chest thing. So we picked him up and I put him over, set him on this nice little mound that he could relax in. And he
This is in
starts,
Texas.
yeah, and all of a sudden he starts crying about something. Yeah, kids are always crying about something.
And then he started screaming.
Yeah, so,
He set him on a red anthill.
yeah, set him on.
We used to grab him and drop him in the water.
Red ants are not friendly.
Oh, this
Yeah,
poor kid.
well,
And he
you know.
wasn't very old. I mean, he was pretty little.
It's effective ever since, so he's never. But he was either, I think it was either him or Mark that was Little Shoes.
That was God.
God. So that was his name. Scott was Little Shoes because put his shoes next to mine and he was called Little Shoes. So we were going to go to see the Dallas Cowboys play. And I don't know, he was old enough to walk around it, so he drove the car down
He was
there.
5.
And it parked way out in the middle of nowhere. And said, man, we're never going to find this. So Scott, you see, you know, one thing to remember about today, V5. V5, that's where we were parked.
He still
Irving
remembers
Stadium,
it.
which is, to this day, you ask Scott,
Where they were parked.
where were they parked at the first time you went to Cowboys in? He will know. Never forgot it, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yes, you
we went
were-
to this
I was
Chinese.
so mad
We
at
went to
you.
a Chinese
Well,
restaurant.
No, it was a Mexican restaurant.
Well, it could be any of those. I think it was Chinese and with that hot
It was
sauce stuff.
Mexican. No, it was a pepper. It was a jalapeno pepper. You said I told him it was a pickle. We were in a Mexican restaurant in Texas, and you said, "Here, Scott, try this. It's a pickle," and it was jalapeno pepper.
I remember it being the Chinese food and dipping that hot mustard stuff. And
Oh no!
Was pickle?
It was pickle.
Your attack cat got me.
They attacked each other.
They totally did right under you.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, well, she never let me forget that for the next, how many, been 50
Oh, it
years?
was so mean.
More than 50 years.
Yeah.
Then we got a motorcycle then, so we had something to run around in. That's when I got my first motorcycle.
Yeah.
And then we went down into Florida, and we were sitting on a beach somewhere in Panama City, I think.
Somewhere in
Somewhere
Florida. I
down
don't
there,
remember.
but-
Yeah.
And
And it was December.
do we have Scott then?
We had Scott. Scott
And
was
we said,
2,
you know
and I was
what?
pregnant with Mark.
I'm so close to getting the last year of my degree or year and a half of my degree. We're going home and finish that up. And it was like December
It
or
was December because we headed for Seattle, and Christmas we spent in a Kmart parking lot. I put a little turkey in the oven in the trailer.
yeah.
So,
The pickup truck wasn't like my pickup truck now, which has got 4 doors and doggone thing. It could be a hotel suite of its own. It was a plain old pickup truck, and we just strapped us all in.
we put a mattress in the bed of the pickup, and then when Scott started getting restless up in the front, we'd stop and he and I'd go in the back. We had his toys back there. I mean, we'd be
Okay.
arrested now for doing that. And he and I'd be sitting in the back of the pickup, and he'd be playing with the toys, and he'd be able to stand up and move around and all that kind of stuff. So, while
Yeah,
driving,
right.
yes. And
So we can tell you, sorry, the whole way we lived our youth. If you did it today, they'd throw you in jail for
Yeah.
child neglect or breaking some kind of law.
Yeah.
You know, we were the free. We'd come and go when we wanted. We were little kids.
Yeah.
So
So anyway, we headed back to Seattle.
we moved over to your folks.
Yes, over to where mine began.
Yeah.
Yeah, you tried to get into the U, but it was too late, so you went to Highline for 1/4.
Yeah, I had to go, but I went for a quarter at Highline Community College.
Yeah. And made a pregnant snow lady in the backyard. In that winter, we had a ton of snow when we were staying in my mom's front yard with the trailer. And so he made this pregnant snow lady back there. Because I was pregnant with Mark. Yeah. My mom and I had taken Scott shopping. All of Scott's baby things were left in storage, and so I didn't have anything for the new baby. And so she and I had gone shopping, and Scott was so active that I had to put a harness on him and a leash. And he was pulling me all over the store. And I don't know whether he was a month early. My water broke in the middle of that night, and so we went into the hospital. He was like 5 pounds, 12 ounces. He was teeny tiny. Yes. I mean, they put me out for him, and they were holding him up after I woke up and this diaper wouldn't even stay on him. It was like it was falling off, this skinny little. And I remember thinking when I took him home, oh, this poor baby, he is so homely. I mean, he was so skinny and just didn't look like he was ready to be here, and he wasn't. Once he filled out and everything, it was good, but it was just, And so we stayed at my mom's until September, and then we found an apartment on Capitol Hill that we could manage, but it was a 1-bedroom apartment.
Something I saw in the bulletin board to you know. And so for free rent, you could go and manage this apartment.
And so here we had 2 kids.
1-bedroom apartment, yeah.
And he needed to, and he was in school. And so we had this big walk-in closet that was big enough for a crib and a dresser. So Mark spent the first year and a half or year of his life in the closet. And we had the bedroom then. Eventually, both the boys ended up in the bedroom, and we had a fold-out couch in the living room that we slept on. So, but we were there until he graduated.
A lot of stories with that apartment, man. There were some
Real horrendous things. You know, we were kind of on the borderline of the sketchy part of Capitol Hill and the nicer part of Capitol Hill. I mean, we had somebody, when we were moving in, this is there was our building and then an alleyway and then another building. And so we pulled our truck up in the alleyway there to unload all of our stuff. And pretty soon it was on the kind of a hill there. Yeah. There was a hill in the back and a wall, a cement wall. And pretty soon this guy comes running and jumps down over the wall, and he's running down the alley. And the next thing is a policeman with a gun in his hand jumping down over this wall, chasing this guy down the alley. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? We're moving with a baby and a 3-year-old.
Our lives were so plain, you know.
What are we doing? So, I mean, it was, yeah. And I mean, and then in the apartment, oh my gosh, was it on the 3rd floor or something? That guy got pissed at his girlfriend and threw the TV out the window, and it landed in the middle of the night, right outside our bedroom
window. Not like these TVs now, there's a big vacuum tube. So when he hit
it exploded.
Yeah, it was.
And then we found Sandy, whatever her name was, drunk on the stairs one night, passed out.
We had somebody try to rob us once.
And then we had somebody, actually went through the glass front door, just crashed right through it.
This thick glasses and that.
It was like, oh.
Well, we were right near the ghetto type of area, right there in that borderline.
Yeah, it was. It was just,
well,
and it was hard though.
We were city folks, you know. We've been all in the suburbs and not in the country.
And there was no place for the kids to play other than inside the apartment. There was no grass, no yard, no nothing. So anyway, that was probably the lowest part of our marriage
Going back to school, everybody talks about, the cool place, cool college memories of the rah-rah and the secret handshake.
That's what we
That wasn't us,
remember.
man. We just wanted to get through that thing,
Yep.
get the credentials, and
Get out of it.
get out of it, and go earn a living, and raise a family. You know, it was tough. It was
Yeah.
really tough. Yeah. it
So,
was.
but I mean, I really will have to say that's probably the most interesting part of our lives as far as.
Yeah. Wait, we're just hitting the high spots. It's just,
So, but anyway,
I mean, probably some things if we remembered we wouldn't tell you.
well, you know, and the hard part though is he'd be in school, he'd come home, he'd have to study. We'd get the kids to bed. People move out of the apartment, so here I am after everybody's in bed and he's studying. I'm upstairs cleaning dirty apartments that people have moved out of so we could rent it to the new tenants. And I mean, it was not an easy time. It really was probably the hardest time of our entire marriage. We did a lot of one-day things where we'd go off to Snoqualmie
I never
Falls
had vacations.
and had a
Oh my
backpack for
God.
Mark because he was too little. And Scott would walk, and we'd walk, hike around the falls or up at Mount Rainier. We did a lot of that stuff. We went camping. There's pictures with my mom and dad. They took their trailer.
North Cascades area up there.
Yeah, and we took our trailer and we went camping with them. So anyway, he finally graduated, and we were out of there.
My graduation ceremony. That's my other graduation ceremony. What was it? Nothing. I made him mail it to me. Mail
Right.
the certificate. Now we gone and started interviewing for jobs.
And went to Texas again.
Boeing hired me right away. I worked for Boeing for 1 day.
Yeah.
And I accepted a job with DuPont all the way down in
Texas.
Texas. Orange, Texas this time. Way down on the Gulf Coast.
Mark was 2 and Scott was 4.
Oh, we went down there. We lasted what?
Less than a year.
And we decided, you know,
This is where we
I
want
can
to
get
be.
a job anywhere. This is not where we want to raise our kids.
You walk out to the mailbox, the humidity would be so high you'd be soaked by the time you
We
got
said,
back.
you know,
I mean, it just was not.
let's just go. So I pick up the phone. I pick up a job shop. Everything. I got a job with Learjet, I guess it was.
Was it Kansas?
No, it was at LTV again to work on the S3A airplane.
And that didn't last long.
And that didn't last long because that's an anti-submarine plane. And then I went to work. We moved to
Arlington.
Arlington, Texas, which is between Dallas and
and
Fort
Fort
Worth.
Worth.
And then I got a job with a contract with Learjet. Got a cool thing. I've had some coolest jobs ever. So we had down in Texas.
18-foot day sailor.
Yes, we bought a day sailor, and I bought it's kind of a hot rod boat. It was a sloop rig, which means it had a jib in the front and a mainsail, and then
We had some fun with that.
yeah, and it was and the keel would retract. We could trailer as a light boat, and so we would go out in the lake there, and the lake went out into the Gulf of Mexico. And
Lake
so-
Sabine.
Lake Sabine, so I was working for DuPont, right? And so we were heading out there one day, and
It started getting rough.
yeah, you know,
So we decided to turn around and go back.
yeah.
And so he's turning around and
There's commands and everything associated with it. Some people don't listen to commands well. There's a whole story about that.
oh, well,
Another
anyway,
story about
that's a different story. But anyway, we're going around and the boats, sailboats tend to lean one way and the one side's up high and the other's down low.
You get on the high side, so we don't. Yeah.
And Scott fell in. And so I went, oh my gosh. And I went in after him. Well, because my weight is no longer on the high side, the whole boat went over right on top of us.
And it didn't have
The,
didn't have a keel.
the centerboard
Lead
fell
keel.
through.
The centerboard fell through, and now they were under the boat, trapped under the boat.
And
then
there's a
Mark and
pocket.
I were on the back. I was hanging on to my.
There's nothing. It was a fiberglass. There's nothing to hold
It's
on
kind of
to.
a race sort of boat. There was nothing to hang on to there, and you couldn't hang on to the center board. It was gone, and I was hanging on to him, and I don't forget our life preserver. So
He and I did not. The boys did.
boys did, always did.
Yeah.
And so we were calm. And then what happened when you were underneath the
Well,
boat?
I mean, there was a little pocket of air under the boat, and Scott, having been in the pool so much when he was really little, I told him, I said, okay, we have to get out. So I'm going to push you down underneath the side of the boat, and we're going to pop up on, up on the surface. And so he said, okay. And so I pushed him down, and I went with him, and we came up on the outside. But there again,
So nothing to hold on to.
there's nothing to hold on to. There's the little rope rings that you could stick your finger in to hold on to. Well, he had taken Mark and flipped him up on top of the bottom of the boat that was up. And he's screaming bloody murder, because he doesn't know what's going on. He's
That's what
2.5.
it
What is
Yeah.
he, 2.5 or maybe
Yeah.
3?
And there's nobody around.
No, and
We're in the middle of nowhere, drifting out into the Gulf of Mexico.
And so pretty soon there's a helicopter going over, and we're trying to hang on and make sure these kids are okay. And there was a boat that was a huge boat that
Crew
was
boat
coming.
from the oil rigs that
Yes.
were up there.
And so they tried throwing the life ring over
But
to us.
came with it.
And I mean, it was so far away, we couldn't let go of the kids to get the life ring. Finally, some guy jumped. I mean, it was a huge jump. He dived into the water, got the life ring, came over and got the kids, got them up on the boat, then came back and got us. And meanwhile, a speedboat, that was out, a recreational boat was out. And he got the sailboat and towed it in to where they could flip it upright again.
I never did. I don't even remember that boat coming to get it. I know that we
Well, I know
they told us where it was and we
Yeah,
went and got
yeah, and when we got it, was upright.
it. We couldn't
but-
sleep for days.
Oh, I mean, it was.
We
That
couldn't
could have
sleep for days.
been just
We'd
tragic.
lost,
I mean,
we'd
yeah.
lost kids. We'd lost my lot. These other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it was
That-
not a good thing to happen.
no. So anyway, that was not. I mean, that's something we won't forget. It was not a good experience, but it turned out to be okay. But
So talking about somebody who doesn't listen well, doesn't do well, doesn't like the tone of your voice kind of thing. So we were in Lake Sabine. We had a little yacht base in there. We had our boat tied up there,
yeah,
and it's a bay.
you have to come through
But you got to go through this little slot between
with
the rocks. And
like Des Moines, coming into Des Moines there.
the sailboat has no motor on it, okay? And so the wind was coming straight through that slot. Well, sailboats don't go straight into the wind. They go at some angle, depending on how good you are and how good the boat is. And so you have a command, and we had the jib on the front and the tiller, and then you say ready about, and that means you get ready to, what they could say, come about when you change attack. And then helm's a lee. Then you put the helm to the lee, throw it over hard, the boom would come across, the sail would come across, you'd have to come across, and then there's a lot of happening there. And of course, when the wind is coming in, it's coming like crazy, and I'm sailing, so I'm trying to get through here, and I had to time it just right, because you don't see when the slot's this wide, but you're coming through at an angle, so you only see this much of it. And I said, ready about, and I'm coming right towards the rocks, ready about. We gotta come about to get these. This. I don't like your tone of voice.
Yelling at me.
Yeah. What do you know, tone of voice?
Obviously, there was a lot more that happened before this game.
That's what happened then, though. I'm trying to
I'm
survive.
going, don't you yell at me.
You can't talk to me like that. I'm the skipper. What are you talking about? That's how skippers talk to the crew. We almost went on the rocks.
No, we didn't.
I used to race them down there. I raced boats, that one a little bit, but I had a friend who had catamarans, he was a kind of a dealer thing, and so he put me up on his catamaran to teach me so when I'd race sailboats. And I would crew on sailboats, bigger boats, the bigger ones we bought in the Gulf. And I'd race those with them. Right, so I was working at Learjet for Australia, what they call rotor non-containment. Once again, this time it was a Learjet, which is a well-known business plane. I worked on that for a while. And then finally said, well, let's go home. So I picked up the phone, Boeing hired me back, and I got back there for a while.
Well, Scott started kindergarten in Arlington. He was 5 and Mark was 3. He bought the property where our existing house is now from his brother when he was 18. So we had that property already. And so when we came back, we rented the house in Federal Way and started building on the property. And so once the house was done, then we moved in there, and Scott started first grade. We moved in August and Scott just had turned 6, or was turning 6. So he started first grade there.
Yeah, and then,
you know, they didn't do the ultrasounds and stuff like they do now. And the doctor told me the last time I went in, he says, "Oh, this just feels like a nice, healthy little boy here." And I'm going,
we had 2 of us, like him, for a family of 4 boys.
And so and that's why there is the age difference between Mark and Lisa. I had to be all right in my own mind that it would be okay if it was another boy. I couldn't go into it thinking it's got to be a girl. So and then my water broke.
I was there for this. I was in the operating room this time.
Yeah, and so my water broke at like 5:30 in the morning, and so they said, well, you need to stay home until your contractions are so far apart. Well, I was probably like 5 o'clock at night, and we thought, yeah, there's enough of this. I mean, and nothing was happening. So we took the boys to my mom's, dropped them off, and just went to the hospital. And I stayed in the hospital all night, and then the doctor came in, I don't know, like 9 or 10 in the morning, and said, you know, this baby is just not ready to be here yet. And she was 2 weeks early. And but because my water broke, they induced her. And so she was born that afternoon. And he was in there with me, cried because the nurses
couldn't believe it was a girl.
The nurses all knew that we wanted a girl, that we had 2 boys. And they they didn't even have to say anything. They just went, oh, and you know, and so.
I still cry when I see her, but for a different reason.
So anyway, we were both just ecstatic that we finally had the girl. So. Once we got a boat, that was pretty much all we did was boating.
I loved fishing. I would go in real dangerous places to fish, but that wasn't a family thing. And so I made the conscious decision, you know, what would be a good and then we also made the decision, we're going to lose these kids when they, you know, get older, boys discover girls discover boys, but this could be some family thing that can keep us close knit. So we got our first boat was a little 24-foot.
The Rhinell,
which was not a great cruising boat. Yeah.
So that would have been, you were about 78.
That was actually trailerable.
Yes, we had that. Well, the first 2 boats we could trailer.
They were big. The second one was
20.
Big to trailer, but I had the truck.
Was it 20?
20. The first one was a 24. The second one was a 25, but it had a fly bridge on it.
Yeah.
That's pretty good size.
Yeah, and then we went to the 29.
29.
And then 32.
And the 32. Yeah.
But all our vacations were spent out on the boat with the whales and the seals and the fishing.
Well, yeah, we just loved it on the water.
Then
we got away from fishing. We just liked to hang around and suck down wine, I guess.
And remember going out off of Stewart Island and the whales? The whales going under the boat and coming. We got that great picture of the 3 whales spy hopping on the back of the boat.
Wow, we got that.
And And all the crabs that we get, you guys would go out in the dinghy with us, so we'd pull that crab pot off, but there'd be crabs running all over the dinghy.
So morning we get up real early to go fishing or get an early start to move, and it can get pretty rough out of the sound and choppy and windy, but in the morning
It was
just flat. And then you'd see the sunrise right over the water and the birds moving around, and it was just great.
Lisa and Anna speaking wine out of the wine box in the boat.
You were like 18.
Yeah.
Going up to Desolation Sound and all the jellyfish. It was a Squirrel Cove and all those jellyfish.
Desolation Sound
everywhere.
is in Canada to the north of us, and it's like boating in the mountains, and the water is
beautiful
70
out there.
degrees, which is not down here. It's lucky
Here,
it's
yeah.
50 degrees, 40 degrees. Desolation, not the long trip,
Yeah, it is.
and it's you have to go through some crazy seas to get there.
Across the Straits of Georgia.
That's when we're going
Do you
across.
remember when we went
the
and
big
we got
thing.
partway across the straits and you look out the front window and all you could see was water.
Yeah, and of
So
course,
when we went back and we found that little cove thing to,
we had to head back.
yeah, it was so
That's where
rough.
the famous chant came up. Charles, get me out of here! like I wanted to be there. Yeah. Oh boy.
That was not fun. That was scary. It really was. The other one was we were coming back through the Swinomish Slough and down around Strawberry Point in the water. I mean, it just got so rough and we barely made it into,
Yeah. So okay. So we were going from north to south heading home,
yes.
and we had power boats, right? With all we had then, and
Somebody that was with us had a
yeah,
power.
Bob and Margie, we sold them
Yes,
there,
they
or Rymel, I think, or the other one. And so normally you go down this big long straight, but this way, with this, but we
Or
went
north
around
to
this
south,
corner, this
yeah.
Woodby Island, and there was the Navy Air Base up there and all that kind of stuff. We got around this corner of Strawberry Point, I guess, and we got hit full force. And once you get in that stuff, you can't turn around because you turn sideways and you'll roll over. And so we worked our way around, quartering the waves, and then we had to turn into the harbor, and I had enough power
Following seas.
following seas. Following seas is what capsizes you. You go down and the sea picks up the rear of the boat, and you broach and you roll. And so and then one of the boats broke down, I was towing it. So we had to help get them in there, Bob and Mark,
And that was like kiss the
That
ground.
was
When we
pretty-
got in, that was really scary.
big rollers, and we were sliding down in front of them.
Yeah.
And that was not cool. That's one of the ones. But when you get inside a safe harbor in the store, man, there's no better feeling. You pick up. I never read the paper. One day I pick up the paper and here's an ad for somebody looking for somebody like when I have these skills. Same thing happened with an airplane I was buying. And so I called the number and the guy the other hand was the president of the company, was Larry Hansen. So let's meet at Denny's, let's talk. Well, he gave me an offer on the spot. And so I quit Boeing and I went to work there as their basically head designer, chief engineer. And
Lisa was fine.
and that was for a very small company. That was a good experience in my life, but then the company got acquired by somebody else, and the acquisition didn't work out. So from that, I lost my job because I couldn't make it with the new owners. I just didn't like them, and I was
It's not a
getting,
good fit.
yeah. And so I was crushed. I never lost a job in my life. And so I looked around and I got a job. I ended up getting a job as the director of engineering for Flow Research, at a research company. That worked okay, but they started running into some financial and management redirection things, and they were laying off my boss and other VP. I reported directly to the VP, and so we were getting nervous now. So I picked up the phone at Boeing, because I made a bunch of contacts when I was there, and went back to Boeing, and I ended up working in all these spook areas. A whole lot of stuff happened, but I did okay, and I ended up retiring from Boeing then the year 2000 hit.
Mm-hmm.
What happened then?
It was before 2000.
Okay,
You were 50,
I was 50.
and they found prostate cancer.
Got cancer. All of a sudden, all this other stuff become irrelevant. All this tons of hours you put in, all the jobs you had, it's completely irrelevant. It's, what am I going to do about that? So we went in and had the operation. Looked to be a success. I had a good medical plan then. A lot of places I didn't have medical. None of the kids had.
Lisa's the only one that we had medical insurance.
And the rest of
the
them
boys, we didn't.
We just paid out of our pocket. We ended up retiring then, and then, no, I did not retire then.
No, you were good for 4 years.
Yeah, after that was like 19, because I retired in 2000. My cancer came back after they took my prostate out. My PSA started rising, and what that happens is, they didn't tell me about this, is if that comes back, it is essentially incurable. Average lifespan 7 to 10 years, and that was in the year 2000. Right, and so we retired.
Yeah, at 55.
And then we started looking around and hunted down the best place we could find in Seattle for treatment. And I signed up for a research thing they had going. They managed to keep me alive with the combination of some research stuff and some,
Tried and true drugs.
state-of-the-art stuff. That was a big part of our life. A lot of our life was chase the kids around when they started getting old enough to join sports. A lot of our time was consumed.
Basketball, baseball, all the way until you were a junior.
Now, Scott wasn't big into Mark wasn't big into
Well,
sports.
they did when they were younger, but then they started working. Burger King and Ivers.
Yeah, I would say that Burger King and Ivers. Mark worked at Burger King. Scott worked at Ivers. One thing I was forever impressed is these kids had a super work ethic. Man, they were not late. They were worked hard.
Yeah.
They were really, really good. And Scott, when we were going somewhere, they spilled the...
Oh, he was getting ready to go to college. Spilled hot grease on his foot and just burned it. And had to go to and have the dressing changed at the doctor's every other day or something. And here we were taking him over to college and over to WSU and had to leave him there. We had to find the infirmary and had to get it set up so he could get the dressings changed on his foot. Our first baby going off to school and we were leaving him there injured.
Didn't he fall down? He had his chin on the coffee table and bite all the way through his tongue?
Oh, he was two when he did that. That was Mark that split his head open while we were at the tavern. Oh, it was Scott. Mark was the one that took care of him. We were at Jocko's. You were coaching the women's soccer team, and Jocko's was our sponsor. And so after practice and after the games, we go to Jocko's and have a beer or have a glass of wine and let the kids home alone. And Scott jumped from the top stairs.
So they were seeing
how
many stairs up they could go. So you go down a set of stairs. If you jump. You're going to hit
and split his head
basically the floor.
We get home and there's an 8-car in the driveway, and Scott's been bleeding all over the place. And the neighbor calls us and said, "You need to come home." Good parents in the tavern drinking while they're And the son, their son
Which
is
did the
bleeding.
end, or probably child services people take our kids away. If we were lucky, that could have happened.
Yeah, I know.
We sing Happy Birthday, and it's kind of like everybody chimes in and sings this. We all sing Happy Birthday, but we just don't sort of start at the same time, and,
Yeah.
and we don't end at the same time. We end at the same time. We don't always have the same words. So it started with, I think it was when the kids were little. One of the kids couldn't really say. We were trying to teach them the words, but then they'd get birthday, happy bird, until we started singing, and then everybody come with their own versions of, instead of saying happy birthday, birthday, happy, and then people started laughing and singing over, and the little kid, I don't remember what kid I was holding when we were standing next to the table.
Probably Lisa.
Yeah, and everybody laughed, and then so every birthday since then, we sort of got honed the thing that everybody's could hardly wait to get that song and put their version in, but the important thing was it sort of started at the same time and ended at the same time, and
Nothing else was the same.
yeah, and it started with a hap and it ended with the day, but in between the worlds got moved around, the timing was in there, but everybody was really happy about it, so it turned out to be a joyous celebration rather than just droning along with the song that's been there for 1,000 years that nobody pays attention to. It has no character whatsoever. So we've done it for eons.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. First motorhome was, we actually borrowed your folks, did we?
Yes. And
So-
then we borrowed Scott's.
We had,
we had trailers.
We had always had trailers, and then your folks,
Well, they had a trailer, and when they were coming back from California, my dad, I don't know exactly what happened, but it flipped. And when they do that, they're just totaled. And so after that, they got the motorhome.
there was a place they always went in Carpinteria. And they changed the rules, it had to be a certain length. I was traveling down there in business, and I went down and talked to the ranger and everything. And I said, hey, if here is a motorhome that will fit, and that's your favorite spot. And so they went out and they got that, and they went down there, and then so they said, hey, this is a family thing, kind of the way we think of ours, but it's not just for us, it's for everybody to use. And so we're usually real reluctant to do that, but we borrowed it. And
We did once or twice.
yeah, and went out in a motorhome. We went down to California, I think, and did some things there. And then we it had problems with.
Well, and then Grandma had dementia, and so they weren't
Yeah,
traveling
they couldn't
anymore,
use it,
and so
so-
they just said,
So they kind of,
"Take
well,
it."
why don't we keep this over here? So I basically bought it off of him. I mean, basically, I bought it off of him. So then once we bought it off him, then it had some problems, and it tear the whole front end off. It has dry rot,
Leaking, yeah.
a bunch of things like that. But it also had problems with the transmission. Mark and Kim borrowed it, and they were going up Siskiyous, and it quit on them or something like
We
that.
had to do that test too, though.
And we had installed, we had one place. Well, about time to find a place to stop. Let's go over here. And we go up Grapevine in California. And then
We get
they
up-
said there's a campground up, and the road got worse and worse and washed out, sort of in one place you could barely be. But got up to the top, and they had these signs everywhere.
bubonic plague.
Bubonic plague. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
Criminy.
The
And
critters.
So we
got it.
started to head back down there. And that was an interesting.
We ended up just kind of pulling over in a wide
Yeah, hanging
spot.
half off a cliff. It was really hard. It was a narrow road.
Yeah.
And that was an
Another
adventure.
adventure. Yeah.
So then we finally, Scott got a motorhome. And so he let it borrow us, and we took that on a vacation or two. Even then,
I don't think the only took one.
yeah, and it was a real nice one. About the same size, 25, 26 feet. Only had a slide in it.
Yeah.
And then we,
Not real big. But
So then we went to a RV show, and we saw all these RVs, but they were great big super expensive things. One that we found this one is geez, this isn't that bad. Well, it wasn't cheap, but
And you know, it didn't have any slides in it or anything. We thought, oh, we can afford this and we don't need a slide. And then we started looking around at the
next thing you
same
know, we're-
brand. But you can get one with slides in it that was, you know, I mean, it was not cheap, but it wasn't as expensive as some of the
Yeah,
others.
so they're-
So
we got a super deal on it.
yeah.
So they're, you know, every class, those are called Class A's. And then we started using that, and we had lots of adventures in it. Lots of adventures in it.
Yes.
How many times did you? So she was always driving it when we'd have something like the tire would get them blown
yeah.
up.
Something always happened when I was driving. We don't go anywhere.
We don't go anywhere. We don't do anything, and the kids know that, so they spoil us. And they send us on these places like out in this Alaska cruise or to there, or
Yeah.
Scott and Kim asked us to babysit their kids when they went to Hawaii. And I says, well, sure, that's what grandmas and grandpas are for. Just, no, you're going to come with us and do it. And so we stayed at the snooty places. Fort Vallarta, we did all kinds of stuff there. We went on horseback ride in the mountains. We went out and did all the touristy things we've never done in our life. You know, went on this boat out to this island, and like I said, we rode these horses up in the way up in the mountains.
Comfortable wooden saddles.
Yeah, and
But it was cool.
and we take the bus into town and walk around the town, and it was a lot of fun.
And then you and I went on a soccer tournament there. You came and played soccer with my team.
Fort Vallarta.
Yes.
You played down there, really?
Yes. Yep.
I was the ringer.
I just stayed home. I had to work. But that's what we do, Jeremy and I. They have all the fun. We work.
Yep.
They are good people,
Yes.
and they follow the rules. You know, what they do. They are all successful, but they are just good people, and they you know, they hassle us a lot, but they care for us a lot. We've had some things happen, even in particular, that they're there. They're just always there. And
Yes, we can count on them.
you know,
For sure.
but they grew up just solid, good, and successful people, and with good families, all of them, good families.
It's so much easier and so much more fun when they're your grandkids than it is when they're your kids, because you're so conscious of, you know, making sure that they're good people and turn out right and all this kind of stuff. Your grandkids, you can spoil them and give them pop and give them stuff they're not supposed to have at home, and you can send them home and they'll never tell.
Mom and Dad's probably make.
Oh, they always tell.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they're all good kids. All the kids,
Oh,
their
no.
kids are really good. All the grandkids are just.
Yeah.
They're all different.
Yes.
Well,
I can remember when Scott and Kim called, and they said, they were telling me, you know, I think you were there when they called.
I'm never there.
Yeah. But anyway, they said they were pregnant. I can remember just screaming. I was so excited that they were pregnant. And then I don't know what happened, but we got disconnected. So, but anyway, yes, it was pretty exciting. I was home. I think I was by myself. I don't think you were home. And Mark called, and he kept calling me Grandma. And I said, yeah, I know I'm Grandma, but I mean, the way he was saying
Grandma,
it.
because Melissa.
Right, but the way he was saying it. And finally he said, Kim's pregnant. And so I was so shocked.
I remember Scott called me with Taylor.
I don't remember how we found out.
Do you remember how they told you about Nikki?
Yes, Ryan, what's when we were taking care of Ryan, and Ryan came in, and I don't know whether it was Mark or Kimmy prompted him, do you have something to tell Grandma? And he said, I be big brother. And
Yeah.
so he was like maybe 18 months old.
They're great brothers, sisters.
Yeah. And so, and then with you in that quilting book, I can't believe I was so dense. You came over for dinner, and we were sitting outside. It was in the summer, and we were outside at the table. And you said, "Oh, look what I bought!" And you showed me this quilting book with baby quilts in it. And we talked about quilting before that, and it just never clicked. And you finally had to tell me.
It's a baby quilting book.
So I for some reason, and then with Gavin, Carter had on a shirt. You were the one that
Grandpa, out of the most least observant person in the whole family, was the one person that figured it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Love for what?
When she was pregnant with Gavin,
Uh,
because we were up in Anacortes.
And what did the shirt say?
Was it the same thing? I'm going to be a big brother.
Yeah,
or
this little
something?
monkey's gonna be a big brother.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah. Okay.
spent a
And
lot
I
of
still
time
thoroughly
making sure
enjoy
that they
the
were
kids.
getting
I enjoy sitting down and playing games with them and doing stuff with them. You know, they're really fun.
The things that we're most proud of, you still want to do stuff with us. We've had kids move in with us that couldn't get along with their parents at all. And so they move in with us to kind of get through that. But you kids would still want to do stuff with us. You know, you stay in touch and
Either that or they just pretend.
well, they pretend.
Yeah.
And they, Scott and I go on these great adventures and we come on adventures with Mark. The one that I get rekindled my motorcycle thing, I want to get in that. Jeremy, on that dirty face thing. Well, first of all, he was riding these motorcycles all around. This motorcycles all around up there by Lake Wenatchee, those trails and things. And then Mark has always wanted the motorcycles because I never let him get
I
one.
know he resented us to no end because we wouldn't let him get a motorcycle when he was
Now he's got a
teenager.
garage full of them. And,
Such a middle
That's
child.
when I sort of said, well, that's something I could do with the kids. And we try to stay as active as we can.
Yeah.
And like you started this whole thing, how old are you? Well, we're 73. How old do we feel?
Not 73.
No, not even close. 20 years less than that. We tend to feel with the age of the people we're with because you can't see yourself, you know. So you feel like you're the age the people you're looking at.